Nothing but junk mail and overdue bills to keep me company. Seems nobody wants to hire a real private dick anymore, a professional like me. A guy who does the detective work nobody else wants to do. A guy who wears hats and walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, politics.
It's a cold America with cozy harbor towns. It's salty air, wicker chairs, and a soap that...
Give me the finger when you're ready.
The spirit of Massachusetts is the spirit of America. The spirit of the red, white, and blue. The spirit of Massachusetts is the spirit of America. The spirit that we want to share with you.
All right, folks, welcome to this Monday edition, and this is actually, politically speaking, with Senator Mike Moore. We usually do it the first Monday of every month, as you know that, but we had a little change in the schedule and pushed it off a week. So here we are, we're politically speaking with State Senator Mike Moore, fishing from Beacon Hill. Hey, Senator. Good afternoon.
How you doing, Joe?
I'm well, thank you. You were at a conference last week, and that went well?
Yes, yeah, went great, and I think when I called you, when we spoke that morning, I had the pleasure of telling you about our marathon session that we've been in.
Yeah, you had just left Beacon Hill, didn't you, and headed to the airport, like right from session?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, we went, it's like a 23-hour session.
Yeah. Well, the feds followed suit recently, right? They had a marathon session too.
They always say Massachusetts is a leader in the country.
Yeah, gerrymandering and everything else. All right, folks, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. It's 508-871-7000 if you'd like to join the conversation over the next hour with Senator Mike Moore as we talk politics here and what's happening in Beacon Hill. So a lot has happened, and I got some notes from your office with legislation that you got through, things that you've been working on. I really don't know where to start. So I don't know if there's something in particular that you're proud of or you want to talk about.
Well, if you want, let me just go through.
Sure, you can go.
So the first, what I sent for information was an act for the regulating enforcement of illegal hunting practices. That's a piece of legislation that's I sponsored. We've done it. It's passed the Senate 3 times and it finally passed the House, and so we were able to get that through.
So this will increase fines and penalties for poachers.
Yes.
So illegal
for illegal hunting and also marine fisheries.
Okay.
So this, so they hadn't been these laws hadn't been updated in 60 years, 70 years. Yeah. So what it did is also makes Massachusetts. We were the last state that was not part of this compact. There's a Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact. Basically, all it does is it makes us part of a national reciprocity, so that if you're caught violating a law here and your license gets suspended, other states or suspended or somehow impacted, other states will honor that as we honored theirs.
So if you're actually from Minnesota and you're messing up here, Minnesota is going to yank your license too.
Yes, and also if you're in Minnesota and
we can.
Right, we can do the same thing. So we actually, one critical part of this law that we have in there is because every state does have some variation, just to make sure we have protecting everyone's right to due process. If there's a law that's in effect in another state that is not in effect here, then you can go to Fish and Wildlife, you can have a hearing, and you can appeal that. And if you show that that's the case, then we would not have to honor that.
Okay. And so prosecutes violators in their home state, regardless of where the offense took place. Or was committed, I should say.
Well, we can't prosecute people. We can only prosecute people here in Massachusetts that conducted here. So if you commit the crime.
Okay, so if you do the crime in Mass, you're still prosecuted in Mass. You don't send you back to be prosecuted under Massachusetts law.
Correct.
All right.
What I think what they're referring to in the notes is that they would then honor our prosecution from that home state, and then vice versa. So that was passed. We also passed an act protecting research animals. So
this has been out there for a long time.
Yes.
I got approached by people on this years ago to do shows about this. And they would destroy these research animals.
Yeah. So this requires them to be. These animals have to be offered up for adoption. And something I never
provided that they're not too damaged, I
yes,
would assume.
Right. But actually, one thing I didn't realize is that this there's a greater amount of beagles that are part used in this, and I never realized this until this law actually started working on this law.
Beagles are hugely used in research animals. As a matter of fact, there's a beagle rescue adoption center which just specializes in the beagles.
Yeah.
So they're for whatever reason. I mean, that was my first dog as a kid, was a beagle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, named Molly. Yeah. My uncle gave me a beagle when I was a little boy. Yeah, that was my first dog.
So, all right. So the others we have an act driving clean energy and offshore wind. That legislation had actually been in a conference committee. That was part of the I don't say the problem, but what was going on that last night of session was that there were several conference committees that we were waiting to get a report on, that we kept hearing, oh, we're close, and the close kept dragging. So this was one of them. So this is our clean energy and offshore wind legislation. We also did that night an act expanding other.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because what does that actually mean? In the notes, it says make screen transition more equitable.
So what does that mean? Well, there are different incentives that are going to be in the law.
Okay.
So one thing we realize is an expense to this. So we're trying to make it where there's going to be access to these programs throughout all the different demographics. So one thing that we looked at here was the tax credits for purchasing electric vehicles. So we established tax credits that, the federal government has it. So you'll be able to build upon what the feds have with what we are passing in this legislation, which will bring down the costs of electric vehicles, which hopefully will make it more accessible to the general public. We have trying to establish cooperation across state lines. So one thing you have here, if you look at an issue we have with wind power right now, I was part of a group that I want to say 6 years ago, that we went to Canada. We up to Quebec. We dealt with some legislators up there, the legislature up there, and we tried to establish. The state did do an MOU. Well, actually, say a resolution. We did a resolution asking the governor to look at increasing the use of water power from Canada. But the problem we had with that is that it had to go through state lines. So Vermont ended up being an issue where they wouldn't let the
hydroelectricity pass through.
Yes, they wouldn't let the building of new lines to go through the state. So there's ways that we empowering the administration to establish better working relationships with other states to try to increase our access to other types of power. Then we've also got expands the role of the Clean Energy Center. So basically, that's Massachusetts state agency that would really be the one who, if you were looking at trying to access grants or access programs, or looking at trying to develop new programs, they would be the one that you'd be dealing with. But then obviously this is just a note, creates new jobs and trains people to fill those. The expansion of renewable energies is going to allow for the expansion of that industry and is going to result in more jobs. There's also ways to provide training programs so that people can get trained in these skills.
So it promotes offshore wind. I mean, that's a great term and sounds great, but people who live in Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and Situate, and so forth, have stopped windmills for being built out on the ocean for a long time. Are we going to get around that and see wind power on our ocean?
Hopefully. I mean, all you can say is, the intent of it is to try to expand our capacity. I was going to say is hopefully it's going to work.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's going to increase the opportunities for us, because we really need to find a way. One issue with all of this is that we're trying to go to more clean energy, and I guess conversion I can think back to years ago when everyone tried to get off of the grid because it was when I was younger, because you had rolling blackouts in places and you wanted to try to develop energy sources. Well, now we're trying to get back on to the electricity and expand it because it's a cleaner energy. But the problem we have is right now the grid doesn't have the capacity to handle everything.
Especially if you start plugging in tens of thousands of electric cars.
Yeah,
to charge.
So this is where we need to develop the other power sources for this.
Yeah.
See, then advances solar power, promotes geothermal, sites energy storage, decarbonization of transportation, so underneath that makes the T more green. So there's a goal of getting the T completely electric.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of set out goals and things that would like to happen without specifically creating how to do it.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, so like the T, the goal is to get that 100% electric. Okay, so now the T is giving the option how you get there. So
right. And they have a lot of problems today anyway, right? I mean,
the T, the T's on the verge of, if you read the media, the T's on the verge of some parts of being a federal takeover. So because of some of the safety issues. So
we might see a slow moving.
And I think that this is probably, I've already
1 minute, Joe.
voted 3 times or 4 times for comprehensive reforms of the MBTA system. I can remember the second time myself and another senator from Central Mass voting against a $140 million bailout because it was just a bailout and there was really no substantial reforms that were made to it. So maybe this is finally going to be the time that the fact that the feds come in and if the feds do come in and take it over, that we see some substantial changes.
Well, we're going to have to take a break in a second here, the first break here on the Monday edition of, again, Politically Speaking, with State Senator Michael Moore, who's in studio with us to take your calls at 508-871-1000. That's 508-871-7000 if you want to join the conversation. And Senator, quickly, they can reach out to your office by email.
Michael.moore@masenate.gov.
Excellent. All right, folks, so with us. We'll be back on the other side here as we continue with Politically Speaking on AM 830 WCRN.
You're out. Yeah, I got no problem with that rescue thing, just as long as the animals don't wind up in the Koreatown wet market.
Oh, you mean it's food?
He's being funny.
Well, it's not very funny, but
not if you're actually eating the dog.
Unfortunately, that kind of shit goes on. And kind of shit is a technical term.
Well, it does happen in China, in parts of Taiwan today, still. I mean, they have the Yulin Meat Festival, which is all dogs, by the way.
The what?
The Yulin Meat Festival every year. Do you know this in China? It's a big holiday.
It's a dog and pony show.
No, it's just dogs. They're literally grilling dogs on the street.
Dog and pony show minus
large
the
dogs.
No, they're actually grilling the dogs on outdoor grills and shit. And the dogs, the carcasses are all stacked right there in the market.
Oh, really?
It's disgusting.
Americans go to China and Korea all the time and go into the wrong restaurant, even though it's stated this is a dog food. This is a dog restaurant. Americans go in there, they have a meal, and they come out, and somebody says, "Well, how did you enjoy the dog?" And they're like shocked, but it's part of what they do there.
Do they then proceed to vomit their food?
Only psychologically.
Yeah. Just go Google it and look it up. Yulin Meat Festival. It's dog meat.
Una.
And they have
30 seconds
grills. Yep. And dog carcasses, you see them all stacked next to, and people are grilling it up, and you can get dog sandwiches and take dog home, and there are no stray dogs walking the streets there. Man's dog got out in Taiwan and disappeared, and he swears that someone grabbed it and had it for dinner.
That's right. He and I were talking about that. That's not unusual to lose an animal that way. All right, guys, here we go.
This is the Joe Mangiacotti Show. We are the show.
All right, folks, welcome back to Politically. Speaking with Senator Mike Moore in studio at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Don't forget, we're live streaming on the TuneIn app. If you want to listen to the station 24/7, it's on. It's just a collection of radio stations. If you don't have TuneIn on your device, it takes seconds to download. Punch in WCRN. And we're streaming 24 hours a day. Do me a favor, hit that like button so we know you're there. Also, streams on my social media platforms at Joe Mangi, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. Senator Mike Moore in studio, 508-871-7000. Going over some of the legislation that has recently passed in the House up in Beacon Hill. Not federal. We're talking about Massachusetts law. The Act for Protecting Research Animals, H901, passed the legislature. That will be saying that these research animals will go up for adoption after they are decommissioned. We know that the beagles are a big portion of that.
Yep.
Big act on driving clean energy and offshore wind here in the Commonwealth. Setting some goals there. The details, I guess, for the different agencies to work out.
Well, different agencies and different municipalities to work out. We also established 2 trust funds, and one of the trust funds is specifically geared towards expanding, as you had talked about, the charging stations.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to be transitioning away from fossil fuels in motor vehicles, we need a stronger charging station. So, and this benefits people too in the aspect that the more charging stations, because we do have that filling up time, the charging time, you don't have to get a full charge if you know that I can go 50 miles down the road, 100, I can get a recharge. So you don't always have to take the full amount of time to get to that full charge if time.
So the thing is, though, at these charging stations, so you pull up and you put a credit card in you pay per minute? Or volt? I mean, how do you pay? These aren't free charging stations, are they?
Oh no, and actually, that's I don't know how they are going to be working out the charge. That I am familiar with.
Okay. Because we've heard stuff. I've heard stuff. People have called into the shows over the last year or so. From some of these locations that have free charging out in front of certain stores to charging stations where you're paying $9 for 5 minutes type of stuff. So. How's that regulated? Who's determining the rate at which you pay?
Joe, that's actually the first I've heard of that. I haven't had anyone email my office or call with a complaint about that. Now, obviously, for business, it's a private business. If deciding to, provide that free service, provide the free service, then provide the free service. But now the charge, I'll have to look at the.
Well, I think that's an important thing. I mean, when you pull into a gas station, we all pretty much know a range, roughly what we're going to pay per gallon of gas, it being pretty high right now. But that's going to be at all the gas stations. But there's no set understanding of what you're paying per minute, or is it rated on volt or kilowatt? Exactly. Like how are you paying for electricity that you're using to charge outside of your home? When you plug it in at home, you've had a meter installed, so you know exactly what's going on. And that's an expense that, we don't have a lot of discussion about is when you do get an electric vehicle, you have to install the charging station in another meter a lot of times. So
part of this legislation is looking at the building codes, so that when the building codes, new homes are being built, that they'll be in compliance with the newer
charging stations.
Right. So houses will be built those things in there. One thing that this legislation does give an option to 10 communities, and it's up to the communities. They would designate themselves where they would go fossil free on new construction. So basically, it's almost like a home rule or a local option. And we had a lot of controversy over this because the original version that came out of the Senate just allowed for a community to designate themselves up to 10. With any new construction, they would transition over in the new construction to all the new building codes, new renewable energy standards. And we had some concerns from the pipe fitters and some of the other trades on the impact that would have on them. The other issue that we had with this was that this is obviously could temporarily increase the construction cost. well, there's a concern about we have affordable housing issues right now in the state. So for a community to designate themselves as one of these 10 communities, they would first have to make sure that they have reached the 10% goal of having affordable 10% of their housing stock being affordable before they can access this. So we didn't want to negatively impact the efforts of going, making sure.
But how does a community, how do they go fossil free so they don't have oil tanks put in the house?
So new construction.
And electricity.
Right, they'd be tying into the grid.
Electricity could be coming from a coal burning plant.
Well, we don't have any, well,
No, you have no control over that.
no, but we also don't have any coal burning plants here in Massachusetts.
Well, where does the electricity come from in Massachusetts?
It's coming from the grid.
Okay, and the
grid
getting it from?
The grid is getting from the plants here, which is more fossil fuel, is right. So there was a difference between coal burning and...
Well, okay, but fossil fuel.
Yes.
So the point is most houses get electricity, and that electricity is coming from some kind of fossil fuel. Most of the time, because we don't really do, and I don't understand why we don't do more nuclear. And I'm talking about the new modern nuclear, right? Obama gave some technology away to China years ago because we weren't using it. But these mini nuclear plants are very clean and very safe.
Well, there's two forms of nuclear.
Right.
One is the fusion and fission, and one of them, and I'm forgetting, I don't want to mix up this,
right,
which one produces the rods as waste, and the other one doesn't produce the waste. So that's one of the things that we're looking back here to have this legislation to look at,
right,
is a further development of the non-waste producing nuclear power.
Right.
And then also we have the geothermal, to promote geothermal use.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, in thinking of that, they just dig down into the ground and they use the temperature or the heat coming up from the ground. So, this is an issue that we have right now, is that the grid, and this is where we have some debate that, we don't want, environmentalists don't want the expansion of new pipelines, but that's what really right now is powering the grid. So until we further develop the other sources of power,
right,
wind, hydro, that there's going to be some reliance on that, just to make sure that we have enough power, that the grid can fully operate. So that's something that we are going to have to, we have to watch, and we have to make sure that the grid. That's my biggest fear, is that all our efforts going to climate change and renewable energies, that we don't start experiencing what we saw with gas prices. Gas prices up at $5 a gallon, mm-hmm, or other sort of utility expenses, where the costs are going to go so high that it actually deters people's willingness to try to expand upon and reduce some of the carbon emissions that we have. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that we'll be able to do the expansion, be able to power the grid without in a way that's not going to continue to have the release of the CO2 emissions.
Right. Are we going to see big increases in electrical power and cost-wise?
I'm hoping we don't.
All right, we're talking with State Senator Mike Moore, who joins us once a month for Politically Speaking here in studio. If you have questions for the good senator, 508-871-7000. Let's go to Joe and Morris. Hey, Joe, you're on with Senator Moore, and, of course, myself.
Yes.
Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon, Joe, and good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for putting yourself out there.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Joe was saying how much stuff you passed in the legislature. My contention to what you didn't pass, and that was the rebate for $250 for every Massachusetts taxpayer. I'm a little bit, I feel like I've been kicked in the stomach, because I saw you guys scramble to give yourselves raises and the courthouses raises, but I don't see anything coming back to us, especially where there's a surplus of money. And my second comment is about the wind.
Yes. Yep.
Do you know the cost difference between putting a windmill out in the ocean as opposed to putting it on land? And what's the factors in maintenance and what naturally is out in the ocean? 10 times more things can go wrong with it, and I just want to know environmentalists don't want to see pipelines, but they want to see hundreds of windmills. I don't understand that right away. And one other thing, and I'll get off and listen to your comments. A lot of our technology that we're getting for renewables comes from China, which they build everything with fossil fuels, coal, oil, and we're buying all that stuff from them. Isn't it kind of hypocritical to call us carbon-free when
1 minute.
all the stuff we buy is by carbon from China? And the roofs. One more thing about the roofs. You talk about solar panels, but you never talk about, before you put those up there, you got to put in a $25,000 new roof. And that has to happen every 20 years. So I'd like some feedback on that. Thank you, Mr. Moore. I really do appreciate your attentiveness.
All right, Joe. Okay.
Question, do we have time before we take the break?
We can start. We'll have to take a break in about a minute.
Okay, first, was it Joe again?
Yeah, it was Joe from Mills.
Joe from Mills. All right, Joe, I don't know what the pay raises, because there's nothing that was done as far as pay raises for elected officials. The court, that may have been part of the budget. I think, obviously I can't answer for everyone, but I can tell you there was
1 minute.
there was a good majority of us who were very disappointed on that bill that you're talking about with the $250 rebate. That was part of the economic development bill, and there were three segments to that. There was an economic development bill where we were dispersing money back to cities and towns and other programs to help stimulate economic development. Then there was another aspect of the bill where we were authorizing the administration to borrow or to bond. And I actually had a big, a $10 million line item in there that would have provided up to $10 million in funding for manufacturers of microchips in Massachusetts.
Okay, we're going to pause here. We can finish covering these things that Joe called about when we come back on the other side, folks. This is Politically Speaking with Senator Mike Moore, 508-871-7000. If you'd like to join the conversation, that's 508-871-7000. That's about...
You're out.
Well, I still got more to go on the economic.
Yeah, okay.
Good show. Good show, guys.
Thank you. What else did you ask about?
Environmentalists, and they want to see pipelines, but windmills.
Well,
The difference between water, ocean windmill, and land windmill.
No, the cost difference. But we do have a trust fund. That's that's the other trust fund we have, is to put money in there for the expansion of that. Wind turbines. Difference. Costs. What was the other one? The pipelines.
The new roofs. And China is doing it. Can we really call it green when China is using fossil fuels to make all these things we want to buy, solar panels,
I
etc.?
have an old house. The house before I moved into my new house, we had solar put on. It didn't require a whole new roof. I don't know what.
I never heard that, so I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to get Marcus next. That old man.
Which one's that?
Don't say it like that.
Don't let him hear it. No, Worcester. Oh, man. Did you let him hear me? All right, hang up.
Mark does that all the time. He gets another phone call and he's too busy for you.
They go to one bill.
All right, here we go.
We are the show.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the Politically Speaking show on this Monday, a week later than normally scheduled, once a month. Stay tuned. Mike Moore joins us in studio to talk about what's going on in Beacon Hill and to answer your questions. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. It's 508-871-7000. Before the break, Joe called up with a couple of questions concerning, mostly focused on energy and green stuff and green
The tax
the money back to citizens and so forth. So you were explaining in an economic.
So Joe, the 250 rebate that you're talking about was part of the economic development bill. So again, we had one part of the bill dealt with actually dispersing money back to cities and towns or other programs that were going to help stimulate economic development. The second part was a bonding where we were providing the administration the authority to bond for certain programs that would help economic development. This is one thing I said that I'm very disappointed in, that I had a language in there allowing, that I was working with the High Tech Council of Massachusetts to allow the administration to borrow up to $10 million that could be given out to a manufacturer that would work with one of the state universities to research and create manufacturing of microchips in Massachusetts. Because that's one of the problems we're having right now with the supply chain and the costs going through the roof. So that was one aspect of that part I was disappointed in. The third part of the bill was the tax reduction effort. And that included the $250 that you're talking about, and the $500 that if you were a joint filer. What happened was the administration, and I think everyone saw this in the media, the administration came back and they quoted the 1986 or 87 referendum that was passed, that once wage and revenue growth is looked at, and based on the formula, when it hit a certain metric of that formula, we have to give a tax rebate, and that tax rebate would have been next spring. The problem you had is you had the administration, the governor's office, you had the Senate, that both agreed that we had enough money to fund both. The House had concerns that there was not a lot of that we didn't have the money to fund both, and they had concerns also about, we keep hearing about the potential of a recession. So that is where the bill got left. The economic development bill went to conference, and when the administration added in that law, it increased the cost to about $6 billion. The original program, the economic development bill that we had put forth and that went to conference committee, was about $3 billion. Then the cost of what the administration looked at $6 billion. So that's really what derailed the effort. Now, I'm not going to say, I can't answer for every senator, but I can tell you on the Senate side, there was a vast majority of senators that wanted this bill to get done. It didn't because of that. Now, the way the system works is we're out of formal session right now. Based on the Constitution, we could still, in informal session, pass the disbursement of money back to the cities and towns and other programs. We could still also pass the tax reduction. The only thing we can't pass, because of the Constitution requires a roll call vote, is the bonding aspect. So we could get 2 of the 3 portions of that bill done in informal session, which I hope we do, or the House and Senate, if they could call us back in for a special session. I think the majority, and I'm confident to say the majority of senators, I didn't get a chance to talk, obviously it's 160 state reps. I don't know what the presiding feeling over there is, but I do think in the Senate, you've got the majority that would like to see that bill resurrected and passed. And now, because that bill wasn't done, the referendum that the governor's office did quote, that $3 billion, that tax credit that everyone will get next spring, is going into effect. So that still passed. What didn't, as you rightfully pointed out, did not make it was all the tax reductions that we have in our portion of the economic development bill. So I'm hoping that does get passed, that we can go back and revisit the wind turbine, the difference of cost. I'm not sure. I don't know what the difference of the cost is, but as I referenced a while ago about 2 trust funds that were established as part of the environment of the clean energy bill we did. One of them is to establish. There's a revenue portion of this climate change bill that revenue will go back and fund these trust funds, and one of the trust funds is for the expansion of offshore wind. So that will help with some of those costs. I totally agree with you with the pipelines. One issue we have, and look, and I am not a denier of climate change. Whatever we can do to expand do our research and development of new ways to provide clean energy, we got to do. But I do have a big concern that we are not going to have enough power to fully power the grid. And I would hate to see something where the gas goes through the roof of $8 a gallon, or electric costs go through the roof, or that we have rolling blackouts. So I do have concerns for that. I don't know what you're talking about with the roofs. I mean, I moved to a new home a few years ago. In the previous house, we had solar put on. We did not require a new roof. I know the cost was to have the solar put on was about $20,000, but the contractor didn't charge us for that, and on a yearly basis they would put in for the rebates. That helped reimburse them the costs of the installation of the solar panels. But you're right. If we have anything that's being produced in another country that's being produced on fossil fuels, then we are kind of being hypocrites on that. Yeah. So I think we do have to promote, and I think this is what that whole Paris Accord was originally, was to try to get all the companies.
And China just, because of this Taiwan issue, China just said, we're backing out of all those climate promises. We don't have to do that anymore. Plus, they were planning, their thing in the Paris Climate Accord was, they said they're going to continue making coal plants up until 2032. No intention of stopping for 10 years. Anyway.
So I can tell you, I did have the opportunity to go over to China about, I want to say, like 8 years ago. And at that point, I think it was Beijing. They actually had and obviously it's China with the amount of people they have. I think that city had 8 to 10 million people. They had a whole section of that city that they had designated as a pilot program with a goal, and it might have been by 2030, don't hold me to that date, that they were looking to make that whole section of that city all on clean energy. So yes, they are still manipulating some of it with coal and expanding it, but they are still looking at ways to try to go to clean energy.
Sure.
But you made some valid points there. Hopefully I hit all the points that you called on.
I think we might have. Neither one of us knew anything about having to put a new roof on, though. I didn't know that, or never heard that either. We're talking with State Senator Mike Moore. Joins us once a month for a show or an hour that we like to call Politically Speaking. You can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. Let's go to the phones. Mark has been waiting patiently from Worcester. Hey, Mark, you're on with Senator Moore and myself. What say you?
Good afternoon, Senator Moore. You say you're not in formal session at the legislature. Why don't you get yourselves back into formal session, even if you're going to call it emergency session, and get the hard-paying taxpayers of Massachusetts their tax rebates, like Joe Mangiacotti and Ted A. Get them their checks so that they can help to get them through the winter to buy fuel oil.
Well, Mark, I love the idea, Mark. And as I said before you called, if you're listening, I am all in favor of that. And I do not want to answer for any of my colleagues, but the majority of them, I think, would be willing to come back for a formal session. It's going to take the Senate President and the Speaker. They have to call the session. and both branches have to agree to it. I have no idea what the sentiment is of my colleagues in the House, but it's going to take both leadership branches to call for a special session. I totally agree with you. It's something that should be done, and I hope that it will be done.
Yeah. Too bad you're not Senate President.
Yeah, I agree.
Who do we have to talk to about that?
Well, we'll talk to the other 39 senators.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely. All right, folks. Senator Mike Moore in studio with us. This is Politically Speaking, AM 830 WCRN.
Another aspect, Joe, too, on that, I'm sorry to cut you off on that.
1 minute.
We have in our rainy day fund right now, I think we're talking $7 and $8 billion.
Nice.
So if the recession, the concerns the House had of a recession were to hit, we've got, hopefully, all the talk we hear of a recession won't be as bad as the one we had previously, but hopefully we would have the resources to get through that recession with that level in our rainy day fund. So,
well, I still think it's interesting that the projected drop in revenue during shutdowns in the pandemic resulted actually in revenue.
Yeah.
An increased revenue. And you say, well, that's interesting, because how does that happen? Because you lose so much of that restaurant tax, right? Who's gone, because restaurants were closed and a lot of them shut down. But now our revenues went up during that time. So I think we should look at that and find out where all that revenue was coming from. And let's, do that again. And get
I with 2 or 3 branches basically in agreement that they're thinking we have the revenues, I would hope that we would go back. I hope there is a formal session, and I do hope we're able to, if not go back, at least enact 2 of the 3 portions.
Right.
And again, 2 of those 3 portions would include that tax reduction.
All right, good. All right, well, we're going to take a break shortly, so I don't want to start a whole new topic. So spin for people again how they can reach out to your office and the types of things they can reach out to you for. We never really talked about that.
Oh, okay. Michael.Moore at masenate.gov.
10 seconds.
If you live within my Senate district, we would, as a courtesy, senators do not handle issues of constituents from other districts. But if you have a problem navigating state government, or if you have any sort of issue with the city or town, that we can try to make a call or help you navigate anything like that.
All right, folks, stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment for the final segment of Politically Speaking.
Lights are on.
Lights are off?
Mike is
And we're
on.
streaming to the internet.
He drank too much
Yep,
last
you can.
night.
It will go out over the internet, though. Can you turn his mic off for a second?
Mike is off.
That really was. I think that
Your
was
mics are on.
out of everything that was taking place. That's probably the biggest disappointment, was seeing that economic development bill languish.
That's too bad.
Yeah. You want to play now? You had your nap. Staring at me.
All right, guys, 30 seconds. results on radio.
This is Mark Altman from Mindset Go. Special thanks to WCRN. When I tell you they have helped me get the word out in my business, they really have. Thank you so much for helping my business grow.
WCRN gets results on radio. Call 508-870-5803, extension 222. That's 508-870-5803, extension 222. Or visit WCRNradio.com.
Here we go. This is the Mangiacotti Show. We are the show. You want to know. It's time to talk to go.
All right, folks, welcome back for the fourth and final segment of this month's edition of Politically Speaking with Senator Mike Moore. Senator Moore in studio with us, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. All right, Senator, let's continue because, again, there's a lot of material that the legislature has gone through. You're out of formal session now. Recap for us a little bit, so what's going on.
So some other things we passed at the end was an act expanding protections for reproductive rights. That's the Roe v. Wade.
Sure.
This protections that we passed here.
Throwing it back to the states.
Yep. So we also, we can go back and talk about these more in depth, but just some of the other things that we did was we finally passed sports wagering. So that was passed. We also did a major mental health reform bill that we had passed last September. The House didn't do it until recently, so the conference committee, they worked that out. We also did enacting judiciary bond bill. Basically what this bond bill did was provide technology, the opportunity for funding for technology for the judiciary. But and also another component of that was we brought Massachusetts in compliance with the New York, I think it was the Braun decision, if I remember that correctly. That's the gun decision that they came down on New York and what they had and what was found unconstitutional. So
right.
We brought
one of the things in there requires licensed authorities to deny application or renewal of applicant is determined to pose a public safety risk. That's awfully vague and open.
Yes. Get right back to that.
Okay.
All right. The other bill we did was an act relative to equity in the cannabis industry. We did an act relative to safety and violence education for students. We also did a transportation bond bill. We also passed, then the budget was passed also. The governor had his chance to review it, do his overrides, and we addressed all that. So the gun part that you talked about, yes. So the original version, when the House sent that over, the House had in the language the correction dealing with what the U.S. Supreme Court had made the determination that you cannot, when you get your LTC, they can't restrict. You qualify for it. They can't say it's only used for this purpose or this purpose. You qualify, you qualify.
Right. And they can't say you got to justify it to us now. It's a constitutional right. You get it.
But they still offer suitability.
Right.
But it's got to be clearly delineated.
Exactly.
The version that, again, the House passed a version with this bill. They brought us in compliance with that, but they had also recommended. The term of a LTC right now is 6 years. Their version went from 6 to 3.
Right.
And they wanted the police chief to interview every applicant for their first time LTC and renewal.
And renewal, which the chiefs are like, no, that's thousands of interviews. The chief doesn't have the time for that.
The Senate sent back a version with just
the initial.
The compliance with the New York decision. What came back out of conference, and again, this is where the compromise came in. The compromise came back out of the conference that only upon the issuance of a first-time LTC would the chief be required to do an interview that's got to be taped. So that's what went to the governor's desk. Now, there are some that believe, and again, this was a conference committee report, and we had to negotiate it out. There are some believe that language in there may still create a constitutional issue with the New York decision, because there's just as you started to point out a minute ago, there could be some discretion or the whole issue with suitability is not clearly delineated.
Yeah.
So you could end up seeing us revisit that, or if a lawsuit's filed on a that
Well,
one
that
section.
is just crime for some kind of, I mean, to pose a public safety risk. Depends on the chief and what they consider a public safety risk.
Well, and this is where the Scottish decision from New York, it's you have to delineate what those concerns are. So
I understand the part that says, if there's harassment prevention order, commonly we call it the restraining order.
So actually we did add those as two issues that would provide the chief the ability to revoke or not issue.
Okay, but there's also got to be some process there, because I have seen in my other business, restraining orders to be used as, there's an old adage in the law, right? The law is to be used as a shield, not a sword. I've seen a restraining order used as a sword. I've seen a restraining order placed on people that shouldn't have had it placed on them, but there's no judge that's ever going to not place it. They're always going to err on the side of caution, right, on a restraining order. So there's got to be some path to challenge restraining orders.
So there was a path to challenge restraining orders,
but
just
also
like
the exemption.
Would the judge do that? Now the issue could be with this new language, is that something that someone who has their license taken away or has their license not administered to them, are they going to file suit? So that would really be another way to challenge
and that's
that.
shifting the responsibility and expense onto the citizen. So you got to pay for your rights.
Well, I mean, a lot of
this has come from law cases. I get that.
So this is
but
where
the whole point is, once they have come, they're not supposed to have to be fought for over and over again, right? I mean, that's the idea here.
Well, but this is where, as we all know, attorneys talk to 10 attorneys, you can have 10 different legal opinions.
Absolutely.
So this is something that was developed by attorneys that think that they think that's in compliance with the decision. So
good for them.
Yes.
Good for them.
So the other thing is, and I know you wanted to talk about, was the sports betting. So the longer
that's a big revenue for the Commonwealth, man.
Yeah, $70 to $80 million.
Yeah.
This is something again, before any callers come, I think we should have done this 2 years ago. But this is where you get into the games between the branches. The Senate passed the mental health bill last fall. The Senate passed the mental health bill last fall. The House passed the sports betting. I think it was last fall. It was a priority of the Senate to get a mental health bill through, and it was the House to get the online gaming, and that came down to one of those were actually, other than the economic development bill and that whole issue, these were two of the last two conference committees that everyone was waiting for. It was really both sides holding their bill on each other. If you don't do this, we're not going to do yours. And so that was the game that was afoot that night. And they ended up being able to pass both of them.
So basically, there's a windfall income initially with applications and licenses, just like the cannabis industry did.
Yep.
I mean, what was it, $50,000 for a dispensary license or some ridiculous number?
I can't remember the cannabis.
I think it was $50,000.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a guy in one of my properties, right? He rented a room by the week from me because he came here to Massachusetts because there was a class in Framingham that when that all became legal, they were teaching people how to open a cannabis store, apply for the licenses, how to run and so forth. So he was taking this course in Framingham. So he actually rented a room in one of my properties in Worcester, by the week, just by the week, and that's what he was doing. And he had told me it was a $50,000 license fee, application fee.
There was an application fee, and I actually think it might have been higher than that.
It could have,
but I can't remember.
And then the license is even more than that.
And also this is one of the part of that's cannabis bill that we just tried to address, is that the total assets you needed to show to actually go forward in the process, if I remember correctly, I think it was like about $1 million. So everyone who thought this was going to be grassroots grassroots thing and opened up the small businesses. It really wasn't.
No.
There was really...
You already had to be millionaires.
This was the big business was pushing the passage of the recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a lot of people that thought it should be legalized, and but there
And people thought they could go open, like they were going to open a convenience store.
yes, the small, and this is going, and then the entrepreneur was like, "Hey, we can open up these businesses," but it was the required assets in process just required. It was so comprehensive and so a lot of bureaucracy to it. I guess is
2 minutes. Do it.
So
2 minutes.
so we changed that in the social equity bill, the social consumption bill we did also. So it's going to open it up to more opportunities to people to open these small shops and consumption on site. But the sports wagering, it's estimated to bring in annually between $60 and $70 million.
Okay.
One difference that we originally had is that the House had passed allowing betting in colleges and universities. The Senate didn't. That became one of the issues that was bargained out. The tax that's going to be put includes a 15% tax on in-person wagering and a 20% tax on mobile wagering. We also, in this legislation, create Workforce Investment Trust Fund and Youth Development Achievement Fund, which will receive 17% of the funds and 1%,
1 minute,
respectively, of the revenue generated by the taxes and licensing fees. And it's going to some of that money is going to the funds for Youth Development and Achievement Fund, which provide financial assistance for students enrolled in pursuing higher education and after school and out of school activities.
Okay. And there's some other stuff here that we're not going to have time to get to today. Is this something I can post on
30
the show site, my media?
If you want to put all these notes on there,
Yeah.
you want to put them on there? Yeah.
All right. So what we'll do is we'll do that. I will put these notes that I'm looking at when I'm talking with the senator that his office sends over to me. I will put it on Facebook. I'll put it on tmj.show.com. And that way everybody can go look at it because we have a lot of breakdown of monies into town and the district.
In the mental health bill, if you look at, there's a lot of, this is when you
Go ahead.
a lot of when we talk about gun safety and gun violence and all that, we talk about trying to expand mental health services.
Yep.
If you look at the programs and the things that we did as far as expanding the options and access,
Right.
it's there.
We're going to break it, guys. That wraps up Politically Speaking for this month. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., joining for the Joe Mangiacotti Show here at AM 830 WCRN.